Here's a picture of Lois, who is always punctual. Lois always gets to work on time. It's 9 o'clock, which is her starting time. And where does Lois live? Well, here's her house. She lives over here, which is a long way away. And here she is, walking to work, which takes her some time. Here she goes, and again, and again. And she's there. I can join those two sentences together like this. Lois always gets to work on time, although she lives a long way away. I'll just change that capital S for a small one. Now I want to compare three similar phrases. Although, even though, and though. We can use all three of them in the same way, but even though is more emphatic, although is neutral, and though is more informal and friendly. We use even though when what happens is quite surprising. Here's an example. Here's Pete. He has a broken leg, and he goes on cycling. Put those sentences together and we have, he goes on cycling even though he has a broken leg. That's quite surprising and it sounds difficult, but there he is. And you could use although or though there as well. They're just not so emphatic. Although is neutral and though is more casual. All three of these words are linkers, joining sentences together, but though can also do another job. Here's Lois again, and here's that sentence, but we can say it another way, using though as an adverb. Lois lives a long way away. She always gets to work on time, though. The meaning of though is about the same as although, but now, instead of joining the two sentences together as a linker, it's adding the same idea as an adverb. Though is more informal, and we use it more for speaking than writing.
There is a small difference in the degree of formality of these words, in spite of the fact that is the most formal, and even though is the least formal. Take a look at these examples. In spite of the fact that the Bolivarian Revolution doesn't maintain law and order in the streets, Maduro remains in power. Although it cost $6 million, Abdullah bought the camel. Though he would lose much, Snowden exposed how the American government invades people's privacy in the name of security. Even though Minji is already very beautiful, she wants to get plastic surgery. Alright, that's it for subordinating conjunctions. Now let's take a look at despite and in spite of. These words are also used to show a contrast of surprising fact. Whew, we've been working a lot. Let's go back to the beach. Despite it was raining, we had a lot of fun. Oh, good for you. Alright, now, if we think about this sentence from the point of view of the meaning, it's perfectly correct. We're still showing a contrast. However, from a grammatical point of view, this sentence is wrong. You can't use a clause after despite. We've seen that this sentence is wrong. Despite can't be followed by a clause. Why, you might be asking yourself? Well, that is because despite is a preposition, and after a preposition, you need to use a noun. So, we could say, despite the rain, I went to the beach. Or, in spite of the rain, I went to the beach. Despite and in spite of are both prepositions. They have the same meaning and the same grammar. The first part of this sentence, despite the rain, is called a prepositional phrase. It is also possible to put the prepositional phrase at the end of the sentence. You could say, I went to the beach despite the rain. But notice the difference. When the prepositional phrase is at the beginning of a sentence, you must put a comma after it. But notice how we don't need a comma when the prepositional phrase is at the end of the sentence. Got it? Good. Here's a few examples for you. She said no in spite of his romantic proposal. In spite of being the youngest employee, she got the promotion. In spite of his bad eyesight, Kenneth was able to read the note. I've just told you that a preposition is followed by a noun. And that's only part of the story.
I'd like to take
It can also be followed by all about a gerund clause. A gerund clause, like any other kind of clause, has a subject. There are two things that you need to know about subjects in gerund clauses. First of all, they are usually optional. And, as a matter of fact, they're not usually used. Second of all, the subject must be a possessive adjective or a possessive noun. The possessive adjectives are my, your, his, her, its, our, and their. In place of the verb, you need to use a gerund, hence the name gerund clause. If you want to make it negative, simply put a not in front of the gerund. Like a tensed clause, a gerund clause can have objects, a complement, and even some adverbials. In the examples I'm about to show you, I will only use adverbials of time. For example, we could make a gerund clause, my, not, giving, her, the letter, last week, as in, despite my not giving her the letter last week, she heard the news. Oh boy. Here's another. Her offering them a hand for a couple of hours. As in spite of her offering them a hand for a couple of hours, they decided to do it without her. And here's another example. Their having left early. As in, despite their having left early, they arrived late. Finally, here's an example with a possessive noun. John's not traveling anymore. As in spite of John's not traveling anymore, he has a really nice tan. Now let me show you how we would transform a subordinate clause into a gerund clause. First, take the subordinate conjunction and change it into a preposition. Then, change the subject into a possessive adjective. Then change the verb phrase into a gerund. This is a tricky one. In this sentence, we have the modal verb could. Being able to is the gerund form of could, so use being able to, with the base form of the verb, and there is no need to change the object. Voila! We have, despite my being able to save kittens. This is a prepositional phrase that has a gerund clause subordinate to the preposition. Alright, would you like to see the whole sentence? Here it is. Well, despite my being able to save kittens, I don't want to be a firefighter. Okay, here's one more example. Although becomes despite. It becomes the possessive adjective its. Cost becomes the gerund costing. And again, the object remains the same. And we get the sentence, despite its costing $6 million, Abdullah bought the king. Alright, here's a few more examples for you. In spite of the ostrich's burying its head in the sand, its problems did not disappear. He didn't catch any fish, despite having fished all day. Ooh. In spite of his being a creepy little puppet, Billy is quite popular. Or maybe it's because of his creepiness. Alright, now it's time for your first exercise. What you need to do is match the subordinate clause to its corresponding main clause to make a complete sentence. The answers will be available after the timer finishes counting down. And here are the answers. 1 goes with E. Despite the fact that the sun was shining, the snow didn't melt. 2 matches up with D. Despite all his faults, she still loves him. 3 with B. Although she has many problems, she always looks happy. 4, C. Despite the heavy traffic, we arrived on time. Finally, 5, D. Although the house is small, it is well designed. Okay, on to the next exercise. In this exercise, you must complete the sentence with either a subordinate conjunction or a preposition. Pay attention to whether the blank space is followed by a noun, a gerund phrase, or a clause. Again, the answers will appear after the timer has finished counting down. And now the answers. 1. I like her, even though she can be annoying at times. 2. Although the sun was shining, it wasn't very warm. 3. In spite of her heart trouble, she went on the roller coaster. 4. She enjoyed the concert despite having a headache. And finally, number 5. We enjoyed the evening, even though the weather was bad. If you used a different subordinating conjunction or preposition from me, that's okay, it's still correct. Remember, they are interchangeable. And now, on to the final exercise. What you have to do here is change the subordinate clause into a gerund clause, and then rewrite the sentence with a prepositional phrase of contrast. For example, if I said, I thought he was wrong, although I didn't say anything at the time, you would have to change it to, I thought he was wrong, despite my not saying anything at the time. Okay, good luck. Now, here are the sentences. Again, the answers will be available after the timer has finished counting down. Good luck. Number 1. Number 1. Despite Elaine's being tired, she couldn't fall asleep. 2. In spite of losing his job, George is not at all worried. And finally, despite its being very expensive, Jerry bought the jacket. Well, that's it for this lesson. I hope you've learned a lot. If you liked it, please tell a friend. And, oh yeah, subscribe to see what's coming up next. Bye-bye. Have a great day.